Hi, writers. Happy Monday. And as you can see, today we are going to be talking about the writing process as we continue writing our literary essays. Over the last 2 weeks, you have been reading and rereading and gathering evidence so that your second literary essay on the picture book of your choice will be fantastic. Today, I want to teach you that good essay writers pay attention to the writing process, which is just a method that has certain steps, and they do that to keep their writing on track. So today, you're going to assess where you're at in the writing process and then draft the whole middle of your literary essay. So, just like there are different ways to solve a math problem, there's no one correct strategy as long as you get the correct answer. In writing, there's no one correct way to write a literary essay or write anything for that matter, but good writers tend to follow this process and they tend to use it to break up their writing into manageable parts. So I found this diagram that I really like, and I think it does a great job of showing how, while it's kind of like a timeline, and while we go through these steps as a writer, um, sometimes you have to repeat steps and return to them before you move on. So, as I said before, we've been spending time in this pre writing phase where we were thinking and planning what our reasons would be and coming up with a thesis statement that we had enough evidence for. It is okay that we're not all in the same place, but I do want to remind you that your literary essay will be due on Friday, and today is Monday, which means we need to get you further along on the drafting process today. You can see that part of drafting is sequencing ideas means putting them in the right order, organizing them, rethinking them, um, which sometimes you start drafting and you realize you have to adjust something. So then you start over in the pre-writing phase where you have to gather more ideas or gather more evidence, and then you start over again. And you can continue doing that until you have some writing that you feel comfortable with and confident about, and it is appropriate for what the task is. And then you're ready to go on and focus on editing, which is looking more for cups. Like, does it make sense? Are there capital letters? Do you have punctuation? Did you give in-text citation? Just means you're giving credit to the author. And publishing is when you would turn your paper in or you would share it with others. So if we're going to get to this point by Friday, we need to kind of map out our time. Okay, so once you open up your essay document from last week, you should have your thesis statement written at the top of every page, and you should have your 3 reasons listed out. On the Monday reason, you should have the quote from the text and your explanation. If you have all of that, then you're ready to move on to drafting. If you don't have evidence to support this reason, you'll want to go back and look for evidence from the text. For your second and third reason, it can either be a quote or it could be a technique that the writer uses, or you could use paraphrasing. You may need to go back into the literacy notebook from last week to rewatch those mini lesson videos and complete that work before you move on to this stage. Once you're at this point, you need to remember what a body paragraph needs to include. So that's when you want to go back into your literacy notebook where these items are listed like a checklist, and make sure that you have all of those things. States the claim and one support. We have been we've been calling your claim, your thesis statement, and your reason is it's the supporting reason. So I have my reason, I have my claim, but it's not written in sentence form. So I went ahead, and to me, it's helpful to draft down below. So this is like my pre-writing, it's like my drafting, and down here, I'm starting over on my draft. Aunt Esther, so I'm going to write the thesis statement and the first reason in sentence form. Aunt Esther is one character in the story Shells who shows readers that adjusting to a new environment takes some time. So I have Aunt Esther and how it takes time for her to learn to adapt to a new environment. But I didn't stop there. I wanted to keep explaining what I meant. While she is not in a new place or space, Aunt Esther has to get used to having a kid living in her home for the first time. Okay, I now have my claim and my one support. Next, I have to make sure I give evidence. It doesn't necessarily have to go in this order, but give evidence that shows that the support is true. Well, I can't just, first of all, I still have directions from last week's literacy notebook. We shouldn't have anything like that in our literary essay. This is turning into one paper. We were just using that for our pre-writing process. So I'm ready to have my evidence, but if you think about that quote sandwich, you don't want to just throw a random quote in there without explaining to the reader why it's important. So again, I already drafted this to save time. I'm going to just move it up. So after I have my thesis statement and my first reason written in sentence form, now I'm going to set up the quote. In the beginning, Aunt Esther is really unkind and seems uncaring towards Michael, especially when she complains about him on the phone to her friends. But by the end of the book, it's clear that she just needed time to adapt to having him around. This is illustrated. Here we go. This is where I'm setting up the quote. This is illustrated on page 3 when Aunt Esther and Michael have just brought home all of the new hermit crabs. Aunt Esther, who had not embraced anyone in years, gently put her arm about his shoulders. So now I'm going to cut and paste my quote into here, right in where I need it. And there's other ways to set up a quote as well. You could say, as it says on page 3, Aunt Esther, who has not embraced anyone in years, gently put her arm about his shoulders. And then I need to, like the quote sandwich, then I need to explain why I included that quote. And luckily, I had already done that last week in my literacy notebook. Some of you might need to go back and fix up your wording. I already wrote it in academic language. This quote from the end of Shell shows why Aunt Esther took some time to adjust to living with Michael. But if you have a tone that sounds casual, like you're talking to the teacher like very casually, you might want to go back and reword it. So that's the explanation that I did last week. I'm going to cut it, X, and paste it down here. Okay, now I have the draft of a body paragraph. And I'm going to leave my reasons just for my own organization, but eventually we're going to delete those. So now that I have what I think is my completed body paragraph, I'm going to go back again and check over that I have all of these parts. So 5th grade, just to summarize, today in literacy class, you're going to think about where you are at in this writing process. You're going to, as you could see, I was reorganizing and changing the order of my sentences as I was drafting and writing. So I might want to go back, even though I feel like I'm done, I might want to go back and reread this a couple more times and make sure I'm not being repetitive and that I'm including all of my thoughts for my first reason. This is true for Aunt Esther. That supports my thesis statement. The characters learn that it takes time to adapt to a new environment. If I have anything that's not related to that thesis in here, I need to figure out a way to cut it out. This is big work, but it is important work, and you can do it. By the end of today, you should have not one, but 3 body paragraphs, one for each of your reasons. So I would need to go and repeat that process for my second reason and my third reason. If you need anything, let a teacher know. Off you go.